The language in the Convergence of the Twain is focused on two things. Firstly, on the ship, the Titanic, and secondly, on the iceberg. And this is what the focus for this video will be. First, the language that describes the ship. Second, the language that describes the iceberg. And third, the use of verbs. And I would like you to think of this essay question as we are learning about the language. Explore the ways in which Hardy memorably responds to the sinking of the Titanic in the Convergence of the Twain. And he memorably responds to the sinking of the Titanic through his use of language. First, the title. The Convergence of the Twain. The Convergence of the Twain means the meeting of the two, because convergence means meeting and twain means two. These are both old-fashioned or archaic words. The title leads the reader to expect some sort of pairing, because it is the meeting of the two. So we expect two things to meet. However, Hardy makes us, the reader, wait until stanza 7 for the Titanic and the iceberg to come together. Language in stanza 1. In a solitude of the sea, deep from human vanity and the pride of life that planned her, stilly couches she. The language in stanza 1 forces us to recognize the present wreck of the Titanic on the seabed. It has already sunk in stanza 1. And the language forces us to focus on the contrast with all the pride and vainglorious claims for the vessel. So we are looking at the ship on the bottom of the sea, and this is being compared to what it was like before. The human vanity and the pride of life that planned her. The vanity in question is not when we look at ourselves in the mirror, but the ultimate worthlessness and emptiness of worldly things, because you can't take them with you when you die. You can't take all of these jewels and expensive things with you when you die. So basically it's saying don't focus on material things because they're worthless, as the wreck of the Titanic on the seabed illustrates. Language in stanza 2. Steel chambers, late the pyres of her salamandrine fires, cold currents thrid and turn to rhythmic tidal lyres. The language in stanza 2 details some of the staggering engineering achievements in the engine room of the Titanic. It was a very impressive ship at this time when it was built and when it set sail in 1912. The world had never seen anything like it. It was a supposedly unsinkable luxury liner. It was the largest passenger steamship in the world at that time. And its steel chambers late the pyres of her salamandrine fires. A pyre indicates legendary fire and heat in the engine room, but it also foreshadows the death that is going to happen on the Titanic. Remember, pyre is a fire used to burn bodies. So this is foreshadowing the people who are going to die on the Titanic. The salamander is a species of lizard, and according to legend, it could live in fire. So, late the pyres of her salamandrine fires. Therefore, the words that Hardy has chosen underline the majestic status of this vessel or ship, the legend of this ship. It was almost making its way into legend because, remember, it was the first ship that had ever been built to this size and this grandness. And it was the largest passenger ship in the world at that time. So it was going to make its way into legend with its splendor and its ability to withstand all hazards. But, of course, it doesn't, because it sinks. The word late in the first line of this stanza undermines all of this glory, because it means recently. Until recently, in 1912, when this was written, until recently, the glory of the Titanic was clear for everyone to see. But now, in stanza 2, cold currents thrid and turn to rhythmic tidal lyres. So now, the sea, the cold sea, is running through it when it's at the bottom of the sea. These tidal lyres, these lyres played by the sea's currents, sound like a marine version of this type of harp, the lyre. And just to remind yourself that we also saw the word lyre in the Darkland thrush. These lyres, these rhythmic tidal lyres, was a romantic notion. However, there is nothing romantic about the wreck of the Titanic, with its cold currents playing through the steel chambers, almost like an orchestra. So the steel chambers are almost like an instrument in an orchestra. Language in stanzas 3 and 4. Over the mirrors meant to glass the opulent, the sea worm crawls, grotesque, slimed, dumb, indifferent. Jewels in joy designed to ravish the sensuous mind lie lightless, all their sparkles bleared and black and blind. These two stanzas contrast the details that we saw in stanza 1 and 2 of the luxury liner, and their language is contrasted against the luxury liner's present place at the bottom of the sea. It is dimmed, it is lightless, it is no longer a beautiful, statuesque, glorious ship. It is dimmed and lightless. And the sea worm, and something to bear in mind here, that the worms eat the decaying corpses as well as crawling over mirrors. So they are eating the people who died with the Titanic. The sea worm crawls over mirrors that were meant to reflect the wealthy. So these mirrors were on the Titanic for the wealthy people to look into, the opulent, but instead the sea worms are crawling over them. And the jewels that were intended to delight the senses lie lightless. They lie in the dark for nobody to see. The language in stanza 5. Dim moon-eyed fishes near gaze at the gilded gear and query, what does this vaingloriousness down here? The fish are asking the big question. What is the Titanic doing at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean? This is the question that everybody at the time was asking as well. Why did the Titanic sink? When it set sail, it was believed to be indestructible. And of course, it was supposedly unsinkable. But very quickly, it sank. And it's the fish who are asking this question. What is it doing at the bottom of the ocean? What happened? And the end of stanza 5 is almost like the end of part 1, and the beginning of stanza 6 is Hardy beginning the explanation of why it sank. And he begins this with, well. Well, while was fashioning this creature of cleaving wing, the immanent will that stirs and urges everything. So the language in stanza 6. Hardy stresses that at the same time as the Titanic was being made, or was fashioning, the immanent will, the one who controls everything in the world, the one who stirs and urges everything, was creating the iceberg. So basically, at the same time as people were building the Titanic, the universe was creating the iceberg. Spooky. To think that these two things were happening at the same time. And it was fate who decided that the Titanic was going to hit the iceberg. And it was fate who was making the iceberg. Language in stanza 7. Notice that stanza 6 goes on into stanza 7 with enjambment. There is no punctuation between stanza 6 and 7, so you have to read it together. Well, while was fashioning this creature of cleaving wing, the immanent will that stirs and urges everything prepared a sinister mate for her, so gaily great, a shape of ice, for the time, far and dissociate. Stanza 7 begins with the verb, prepared. This shows the action that the immanent will pushes into being. So the immanent will from stanza 6. Prepared a sinister mate for her, a shape of ice. So the immanent will prepared a sinister friend for the Titanic. And this sinister friend was the iceberg. Now, at last, we have an answer to the title, The Convergence of the Twain. We know what is meeting with the Titanic. It is an iceberg, a shape of ice. Although it is for the time far and dissociate, so the iceberg is not close yet, but we know that the two will experience a disastrous encounter. We know this because of history, and we know this because of stanza 1. We already know that the Titanic, although it's never mentioned Titanic, we know that it's already at the bottom of the ocean. And this stanza prepares us for this inevitable meeting in 2 ways. Firstly, stanza 6 runs on into stanza 7. Secondly, the first line of stanza 7 runs on into the second. It's enjambment all the way through. Prepared a sinister mate for her. The force of the immanent will drives across verse and line boundaries. It goes on and on. It is unstoppable. It is just as powerful as the ship's engine, which was fashioned simply by man's arrogance. So you have a comparison there between fate and the arrogance of man. Okay, this is going to go on into a second video now. So this is video 1, video 2 will follow.